for what reason? Remember the story of David and Samuel? Why did Samuel pick David? Did actually Samuel pick David to be the king? No, he didn't. Who did he pick? He picked the firstborn son, big tall guy. He looks like a good candidate. God said no, he's not the one. He went through all 7 of his sons, and finally he ended up with the youngest son. It was David. And then God clearly told Samuel, I look at men's hearts, not their stature. He says, that's how I pick people to be leaders. And surely Reuben has been shown to be lacking, and he is not picked to get the firstborn rights in his particular family. And he tells you, he's given you a little bit about his personality. He said, he's the first sign of my strength, being the firstborn. He excels in honor and power. It makes it, to me, sound like he was probably a impressive individual. He might have been a big guy. He might have had a big voice. He might have, when people saw him, they said, whoa, he's a man among men, because it says he excelled in honor and power. But then he says in verse 4, he's turbulent as the waters. You will no longer excel. Ooh, what does that mean then? What do you think he's trying to tell Reuben?
Look, he's the opposite of stable. He just makes all these bad decisions, and so he's telling him here that you shall no longer be first. You shall not have preeminence, is what my version says.
Yeah.
So he's telling him flat out, you no longer have that
Yeah.
birthright. But the water, he's just unstable, wishy-washy.
Yeah. Turbulent kind of means that. It sounds to me like maybe emotionally he's unstable, or he just made a lot of dumb decisions, big mistakes in his life, and it became obvious that he was not leadership material. And he gives an example of what he did that was really dumb. And what did he do? What did he do? He what? Well, yeah, he slept with who? Which one?
His father's.
Yeah, it was his father's concubine, and her name was, anybody know? It was Bilhah. She was the mother of 2 of the children too. Bilhah had Dan and Naphtali. So he slept with his father's wife, really, and that was kind of like the ending for Reuben, and it kind of epitomizes all the dumb mistakes he did. That was a really dumb one, and it showed that he lacked discipline and ability to control himself. So he is eliminated, and could you imagine being Reuben in front of everybody and your dad saying this to you and it's from God? How would you feel? Ooh, I'd feel about that big and want to crawl under the table. I'm sure it was probably pretty embarrassing. The next verse, verse 5, says, Simeon and Levi. Notice he groups these 2 guys together. They are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter into their council. Let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstring oxen as they please. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Can you remember anything in particular that Simeon and Levi did to get this particular denunciation?
They raped Dinah.
They what?
Raped Dinah.
Well, that was part of the story. It wasn't, they didn't actually rape somebody, but somebody did rape Dinah. Who was it that actually raped Dinah?
The prince, or whatever he would be called, the leader's son, and then they murdered all the men after they were circumcised.
Yeah, do you remember the name of the town? It was Shechem. which is a little bit more northern Israel. So the son of the king, the prince, was the one that raped Dinah. Levi and Simeon found out about that rape, and they went into town and they did this ruse thing. They tricked them, and they killed every man in the entire town, even the ones that had nothing to do with it. They just killed everybody. And an additional information is thrown in here too that wasn't in the original account. What else did they do as far as violence is concerned? Yeah. Do you know what one of the things that psychologists say about people who are mass killers? In their childhood, they often have a disposition to torture animals. That's how they start out sometimes. I'm not saying everyone, but they have noted that in psychological studies that mass killers often are even violent towards animals. And he says their anger is so fierce, their fury so cruel. These were not, and he says he will not enter their counsel. Why would you not want to enter into the counsel of somebody like Simeon and Levi?
Guilt by association?
Yeah.
Birds of a feather?
Yeah.
Together?
Kind of, yeah. These guys kind of had the attitude, kill them all and let God sort them out. That's Simeon and Levi's attitude. That's the kind of guys they were. You couldn't have a reasonable discussion with these guys without their violence coming up and their attitude to abuse people. And it became so bad that, for instance, like in your home, I don't know how many of you have raised sons. If you have two sons in a family, and if you're a parent, you notice the two boys are always fighting. After a while, what do you do with those boys when you get sick and tired of them fighting? What do you do with them?
Spank them.
You what?
Spank them. I can spank them.
Well, you can spank them, yeah. What if that doesn't work? Sometimes that doesn't work with boys. Huh?
Separate 'em.
You can let them fight them out, but what do you think that they're going to kill each other?
You need to separate them out. You need to separate them.
You got to separate them. You got to keep them apart. Because if you don't keep them apart, what's going to happen? They'll either kill each other or they'll kill somebody else. That's the kind of guys they were. And putting those two together is like throwing gasoline on a fire. You know, they're going to encourage each other to do even more acts of violence against others. So God in his wisdom does what? What does he do to the tribe of Simeon and Levi? He separates them. And he tells both of them, you will be scattered throughout Israel. And if you notice on the chart here, they have this area marked towards the bottom here where it says has Simeon down here in the middle of the tribe of Judah in the purple. But that isn't a real exact location. They were scattered throughout the tribe of Judah and other areas. And you notice Levi has no possession area either. So these two brothers were scattered over the entire nation of Israel, and they had no firm land that was actually allotted to them in the long run. Reuben, his land allotment was clear over here in the corner, which I don't know why he would have picked that area, because that's not the greatest area to live in. Very mountainous, very arid. Huh?
He didn't pick it, his dad did.
Yeah, it could have been. I'm not sure, but
Are you surprised that the Levites became the priests, the priestly tribe?
very good
That's-
question.
That's really seems out there. Part of me thinks that he might be using their countenance because of all the sacrificing that needs to be done.
Mhm.
Anybody of a gentler mind might not just physically be able to handle it.
Yeah. That was brought up in the commentaries too, because I had the same question in my mind. Why did he make them priests if they have this bad attitude? Well, first off, the division of the land of Israel in relation to the time frame we're talking here, this division didn't happen for 400 years. So when he makes this pronunciation, he's going to scatter them. He does. But it's 400 years before they actually enter the land, because they stay in Egypt for 400 years at this point. These are very future prophecies. So by that time, Levi, the family could have been very different by that time. For whatever reason, there's times where God will pick somebody that you think is not a good choice. Turns out it was a good choice. So either way, God did pick them to be the priestly group, and by that time, maybe they were different as a family.
I have a thought of the troubled children are the ones you have to put most effort into, the most talking to, the most education. And so by the time you've done all this talking and education, you've strengthened them to be better people. And
Could be.
so by that time, they can help other people. You know, I personally used to be afraid of folks on motorcycles, but guess what? I married one. I'm not afraid of people on motorcycles.
David?
They got picked because Moses, Aaron, and Miriam was of the tribe of Levi.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a significant point, isn't it? And it's just interesting how things turn out in the future where people who came from a tribe that didn't have the greatest reputation, sometimes there arises people out of that group that go against the grain of the bad attitudes everybody else had and become really good people. So David's right. That's partly why they were picked to do that. So, and you can see there was three families, the distribution of the Levites. There's the Koholites, the Gershonites, and the Maronites. They were, and if you add that up, there was 13 cities and then 12 for the last. It's only 38, not 48. I don't know where the other 10 is. I couldn't figure out in the commentary what happened to the other 10. But either way, there was 10 more cities that they inherited also, in addition to what was here on this particular list.
Were they the cities of, like Solitude, the cities that were for amnesty?
Yes, the cities of refuge.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them were definitely that, and maybe those 10 cities were those particular cities, perhaps. I know there's at least 6 cities of refuge, and so I'm not sure how many altogether there was. So anyhow, any questions on the first group of people here? All right, let's move on. Verse 8. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes. Now, some of your versions will say until Shiloh comes, to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. So what kind of future does Jacob predict for his son, his fourth son, by the way, fourth son, Judah? What kind of future does he predict for him?
Pretty good.
Ruler.
He's a ruler. Very good future for this guy. And what do you think may have caused him to generously praise him like this? What have we seen from Judah that would show that Judah truly does deserve this recognition? What did he do?
Wasn't it Judah that tried to talk the brothers out of throwing Joseph down into the well? Wasn't it Judah?
Well, there's two things that happened. He kind of convinced them not to kill Joseph.
Oh, yeah.
So they ended up throwing him in the pit then, but at least they didn't kill him. But it was still his idea to throw him into the pit, and it was his idea to make him a slave and send him off and sell him to the Egyptians eventually. So that was not good. That certainly doesn't deserve praise. That makes him look very bad. Did something happen later on that changed it?
He was the one that said he would stay instead of, I think, it was Benjamin.
Yes. Remember, Joseph was testing his brothers, and he said he was going to keep Benjamin. And Joseph knew, and Judah knew, that to keep Benjamin would literally kill their father with grief, Jacob, if he kept him. And Judah, the guy who wanted to sell Joseph into slavery and wanted to get rid of his brother, was intensely jealous of his brother, like all his brothers were. All of a sudden, 20 years later, see, time does help, he makes this incredible offer of sacrifice to offer himself as a slave to protect his younger brother, Benjamin. What kind of reaction did that cause in Joseph at that point?
He cried.
What?
He cried.
He cried. I mean, he broke down in tears at the self-sacrificing attitude of Judah, and that's when I think Joseph realized, aha, after all this testing, my brothers have shown myself and the Lord that they indeed have matured, have changed in a lot of ways. They are different than what they were originally. And Judah's the one that led with this sacrificing attitude. And who else has that kind of attitude later on in the history line of the family of Judah? Who?
David and Jesus.
David and Jesus. So that's who comes through the line of Judah. And is it any wonder, it says in verse 10, the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. Where did all the kings come from in Israel? What family? From the family of Judah. That's where they came from. Now, northern Israel, that's a different story. But from the southern kingdom, it was through the tribe of Judah. So, and notice he says in verse 10 also too, until he comes, until he belongs. And some of the versions say Shiloh. Who is Shiloh?
I think it's Christ.
Okay, why do you say that?
I mean, just the way it reads, it looks like it's referring to him, but there's probably more reason than that.
Yeah, I tried to look up the word Shiloh, and there's not a lot of references to it, but most of the Hebrew definitions say the word means peaceful, peaceful or rightful heir. That's what the word Shiloh means. Some of your versions just use the word he. So I think the next part of the verse kind of tells you definitively who it is. And he says, and the obedience of the nations is his. Who in the world could that be? Who the obedience of the nations? Is there any character in the history of the world that was caused every nation in the world to be obedient to him? It's Christ Jesus. So that kind of tells you right there, it is clearly Jesus that he's talking about. And he's saying to everybody, the Messiah is going to come through the family of Judah. And it becomes very clear later on through David and all the kings later on that come along. And when you look in the book of Matthew and Luke, the genealogies that are listed there are the genealogies of who that lead to the final Messiah, Jesus himself, and his family line. Whose family lines are listed in Luke and Matthew?
Joseph.
Joseph's, and also
David's.
Mary's genealogy is in there too. They're both from that family. So you'll see there's some differences, and there's 14 from one point, and then there's 14 others from another point. So you can clearly see that that family line is carried on throughout the history of the nation of Israel through many hundreds of years in the future later on. Some of these remarks in verse 11, 12, I'm not sure what those mean, I'll be quite honest with you, where it talks about, tether his donkey to a vine, and the blood of grapes, and teeth are whiter than milk. I'm not really sure exactly what that means.
Means you're healthy.
It could be. I'm not sure. It could be some cultural references that maybe back then they would have understood better than we would today. So anyhow, so next verse, verse 13, Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships, and his border will extend to Sidon. And if you notice on your map, Sidon is the furthest north dot on the list. It's way up there, just above Azure. Zebulun is kind of down here, and some of these borders are not real exact. Some of these groups of people lived within different borders. It's just, just even today in America, you got all kinds of people living in different areas, and there's no set lines later on, but anyhow, it said they seem to derive a lot of their business from the sea. So, and you can see Judah is down here in the purple, is mostly in the southern region of Israel. And when you looked at later on how the nation of Israel was divided, it was kind of divided. If you look in the middle there where it says, you can see Benjamin, Ephraim, Dan, and Judah, that's where Jerusalem's at. And that's kind of like the border between the north kingdom and the southern kingdom. Most of the northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians later on, which was later on called the tribes of Ephraim. They all ended up being called Ephraim for some reason. I'm not sure why. But in the southern kingdom was called the kingdom of Judah very often too. And Benjamin was definitely a part of that group too. So then verse 14, Issachar is a raw-boned donkey laying down between two saddlebags or sheepfolds, depends on which version you have. When he sees how good his resting place and how pleasant it is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. If you hear somebody that's called a raw-boned donkey, what do you think their personality's like? Yeah. What's the personality of a donkey? Stubborn, bullheaded, lazy. And that's typical of what they say Issachar was. Pretty much that's the kind of person he was. He lived in a very good area, but later on he pretty much, you could boss that particular tribe around. So in his kingdom, you can see is on the map too. Where was that? Issachar. Yeah, it was up north of purple, up next to just above, between the two Manassas. And Manasseh is divided into two places. So on our list here through verse 15, these are the children of Leah. Now we're going to switch over into the next group, beginning at verse 16, and we're getting to the rest of the family now too. Dan will provide justice for his people in verse 16. As one of the tribes of Israel, Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backwards. Now, it might be hard to figure out a little bit just from the reading there what kind of person the tribe of Dan was. What do you think they were? Does anybody know of anybody that's in that particular tribe that you can think of from the book of Judges? Matter of fact, if you want to look there, look at Judges 18 and a few areas around there. Who? Samson. Samson became quite the viper to the people, the enemies of Israel at that time, and he held them back for quite a long period of time. And he was God's chosen servant, to protect the nation from those particular individuals. So Dan, the tribe of Dan was very near Benjamin and Judah right there too. It was a smaller tribe. Dan's is definitely one of the smaller tribes as well as Benjamin. They were both very small tribes. Then verse 19, Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, and he will attack them at their heels. I think that's the one I kind of wanted to read. That's in 1 Chronicles 12. And there's a lot of references, if you look into the future of Israel, that there's some references to these individuals. Let's see, 1 Chronicles 12. Yeah, the tribe of Gad. In verse 8 of 1 Chronicles 12. 1 Chronicles 12, verse 8. The Gadites are mentioned here. The Gadites defected to David at his stronghold in the desert. They were brave warriors, ready for battle, and able to handle the shield and spears. Their faces were like the faces of lions, and they were as swift as gazelles in the mountains. And this is a trait of many of David's men, that they had the faces of lions, and they were as swift as gazelles. Now, the gazelles part's pretty easy. What does that mean about these guys?
Fast.
They were fast, and they can run up and down the mountains. They literally lived in these areas, and they trained in these areas. These guys were incredibly physically fit, and when it says their face, they had faces of lions. Picture right now, too, you got a bunch of guys living outside, training as warriors, constantly out in the heat of the sun, and they probably didn't have a lot of barbers back then. They had probably fairly thick, heavy heads of hair, great big, thick beards. And being in the sun all day long, what do you think those beards started to look like in the hair? Bleached it out, probably. Turned it blonde. So you could see these streaks of blonde through their beard, through their hairs, and all you see is a couple eyes and a nose. They probably literally look like the faces of lions. I mean, they probably look pretty fierce looking. If you were going into battle against somebody that looked like that, I think I'd go the other way. So.
They kind of bordered up, and they kind of almost protected from the Philistines. They seemed like they were the tribe that was the most engaged with the
Yeah.
Philistines. Samson was from Dan.
Yeah, they were very, very fierce warriors. And David counted on them a great deal. So they were held in high honor in many respects. Asher's food, verse 20, will be rich and he will provide delicacies fit for a king. And now, the region that tribe lived in was a very fertile area. Crops were very well accustomed to being grown there. Solomon actually used the food from that region to supply King Hiram, who was not a part of Israel, but he was up in the northern region. When he was building the temple, he wanted the cypress wood from his kingdom, and he paid Hiram with food from Asher's tribe. And they had a tremendous amount of food that came from that particular region. So you can see in the future there later on that that's where a lot of that food came from, is from the tribe of Asher. Naphtali, verse 21, is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. If you look in Judges, chapter 4, I think it was, or 5, that's an interesting section because it deals with Deborah, who led the nation of Israel for a little while. And there's a story in there about Sisera, who was an enemy of the Israelites. He was a general. And guess who killed this enemy general? What's her name? Jael. It was a woman. And how did she kill him? Yeah, she saw him coming along. Their families were friends in the past. She saw him. He was an enemy to her, but he didn't know that. She said, "Oh, come into my tent and rest up." And she gave him some milk, laid him down, let him go to sleep. while he was sleeping, she took a tent peg and right through his head. So, I think that's why it says, a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. These are females it's talking about. So you can kind of see that the females rose up in that tribe to do a great deal of good. So we're gonna stop here in verse 21, and we'll pick it up next week. We should be able to finish part of that, and I'm not sure how far we'll get with that too, but I'm gonna warn you ahead of time too. You guys are, unfortunately, I want to do something I've never done before. It may start next week, maybe the week after that, I'm not sure. But I'm going to give you an open book essay test. An open book essay test. It's not going to be multiple choice. So you don't have any papers you have to turn in. It's going to be verbal. But I got some questions, and the purpose of it is I want to do, I've already sort of done a review of Genesis 25, chapter 25 up to this point. Well, I'm going to do one from chapter 1 up to chapter 25. It's kind of like a review to remember some of the stuff we studied in the past, and I'm going to see how much you remember. I hope you remember a lot. So we'll see you next week, Lord willing.
That's the test week?
I'm not sure. It'll either be next week or the weekend.
I'm skipping.